Robert K. Elder. My first memory is a treasured memory. It's actually when I was 3 years old, and I remember my brother was crying. And I remember this because my grandparents were with us, and we were all on the floor trying to take a nap together. I remember our like gray carpet and this scratchy yellow blanket that we got from Kmart that we still used years later. And he's crying because he wants his mom. And where's his mom? Our mom is having our sister. She's at the hospital. So my first memory is about my sister being born. But new research is putting that memory in doubt, casting a shadow on it. I'm here with Donna Bridge, and Dr. Donna, what does your research show?
My research shows that new information you experience in the present gets inserted into your old memories.
So here at the Big Questions, we're asking, does your memory rewrite the past? I'm your host, Robert K. Elder, and today we're talking with Dr. Donna Bridge, a postdoctoral fellow at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. She's the lead author in a memory study published in the February 5th issue in the Journal of Neuroscience. Donna, welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
So, the Big Questions is sponsored by Shure. They're the purveyors of microphones and headphones. You can check them out at shure.com. And the Big Questions podcast is a part of the Sun Times Media Local Podcast Network. So, part of your study, Donna, is that memory is not a video camera. Can you explain that to us?
Well, our memory is constantly changing. So we've also shown how every time you recall an experience, that increases the likelihood that you'll remember that event in the future. So recalling a memory is good for your memory, if after you experience something. But at the same time, every time you recall an experience, you tend to, mix up details, distort people's names or places, things like that. And so what ends up happening is that you tend to remember whatever you recalled last. So if you recalled something incorrectly, the next time you'll recall that incorrect fact.
So you're not. Yeah. So is it that you're not remembering the event? You're remembering the memory.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so in another study we did, we called it memory is like the telephone game. So you're always remembering the last recall event as opposed to the original experience. So, your memory or what you actually remember from an experience is almost a caricature of the real experience.
Okay, that is frightening. How does this affect your relationship with your own memory?
Well, not that much, because how I see memory, which is that even though we talk about it in this way that, our memory is distorted, it's not accurate, I just don't see that as being the primary function of memory. Instead, I see it as an adaptive process that allows us to interact with our environment and go through life, as a good person. And I'm looking for a different word other than adaptive. But I think that our memories inform our behavior, and that sometimes changing our memories to fit our current experiences is actually a good thing. One of my favorite memories from when I was very young, I think I was 4. It was the 4th of July, which was always my favorite holiday. Because of fireworks, go swimming, having a picnic outside or barbecue. And also, there was this big wheel race at the local park. And I had a Cabbage Patch Kids big wheel, and I was in the big wheel race. And I remember this little boy ran me off the track on the big wheel, and I was leading. I was in the lead. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I got run off the track, and then I came back on and ended up winning the race. And this story, actually, I love that story. Who knows if it's actually accurate? But I think it doesn't really matter, because it actually is something that says a lot about my personality and how I deal with things. One, I deal well with negative reinforcement. When I'm kind of told, "Oh, you can't do this," and I kind of respond, "Oh, yeah," and kind of come back even much stronger than if I don't have that kind of challenge. And I think even if that's not a true story, it's really informed, how I respond to situations. And so that's where I think it's kind of adaptive.
But what do your parents say? How do they remember it?
My mom actually remembers that story. I know it's been corroborated, but I don't trust her memory any more than I trust my own. So
again, and this is like the central, frightening thing to me, which is, how can we know anything at all about ourselves, about history?
Well, I mean, I think that you learn, especially as you get older with history, that what's in the history books wasn't at all a reality. So I don't know. We kind of make up our own past as we go, and I think, like I said, I think it's a good thing. We have this narrative of our lives, and I think that it says a lot more about who we are than actually the experiences we had happen to us, and even how we responded to those experiences. I think it's more so how we look back on those experiences that really shapes us.
Well, and what does this say for things like eyewitness testimony?
Yeah, so that's something I'm definitely interested in. I spoke at this law conference last year, the National Legal Aid and Defenders Association, and this other person spoke in the same panel. She was actually a lawyer with the Innocence Project. Are you familiar with the Innocence Project? It's basically this project, this nonprofit organization that has, what's the word?
Helped exonerate.
Yeah, exonerated a lot of people that were falsely accused of crimes, and so they've been exonerated due to new DNA evidence, basically. But this project has really highlighted, the fallibility of our memories and of eyewitness testimonies, and how it's still relied on so heavily in the courtroom. I was very surprised. I mean, she spoke about things how just somebody that is a witness that's confident will really sway a jury, even if what they say doesn't make any sense. And so there's a lot of different, characteristics about a witness that can cause jury to rule one way. And then so the thing about the memory is that people think, can be very confident in their memories, and I definitely wouldn't think that the eyewitnesses are going up intentionally. Most cases are not intentionally trying to accuse somebody of a crime they didn't commit, but eyewitnesses generally want to help. They've seen some wrongdoing and really want to help, get the guy. And sometimes being excited, can cause them to say, yeah, that was it, but maybe it wasn't, maybe out of the options they've gotten. And then here, we show how our memories change. If you experience something a little bit after the crime, you see some other person, that person's face could get inserted into your memory of, the perpetrator. And that's really scary, yeah.
It's super scary. Well, that's an eyewitness testimony. But what about our own experience? And I'm asking about this because I just read the New Yorker did a retrospective on William S. Burroughs, and he remembered being molested as a 4-year-old. And Axl Rose also had this sort of memory. And now this is in the news again with Dylan Farrow, accusing Woody Allen of molesting her as a child. So what does this mean for that kind of memory?
My perspective on the childhood memories is that I would never want to be a jury member one of those cases. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, maybe it's possible that these memories have been suppressed for a long time and then finally they're coming up. In this case, I think with the Dylan Farrow case, it sounded like it was a known thing and then now it's just coming out. I mean, that's more believable to me than never realizing it, just having some issues all your life, and then 20 years later suddenly realize I was molested as a child. I think that's a lot less likely to be true than something that just hasn't been out in the open, mainly because, as I was mentioning earlier, that events that are recalled after they've been experienced are much more likely to be remembered than events that are never recalled. So if you've never recalled something, it's very unlikely that suddenly 20 years later it will surface. But that being said, emotional memories also add a little bit, a different flair to these processes. So for instance, the study I've done and how we insert new information to our memories, I haven't done that with any kind of emotional material to see if that's true. I have a hunch that it might be similar, but it operates on a little bit different level. So.
Sure. And we should point out that, Woody Allen denies all the allegations and was never charged, and it sort of rages on. I think he may publish a rebuttal in the New York Times. So it's a very much ongoing, thing.
And here's the other interesting thing mainly about it is that I wouldn't even say, so let's say it's not true. I still wouldn't blame Dylan Farrow because, I bet that she really believes it happened. I mean, so that's the other thing about our memories, is that it's not that somebody's intentionally lying. Our memories actually change, and that's what we think, happened. And so that's the other thing with this, and then with the eyewitness testimony. I don't think that they're out to get somebody. I think they really genuinely believe and have high confidence, in their memory. It's just, it changed. It may have changed, but how can we prove it?
Right.
One way or the other.
Well, and again, that's what I'm interested in, the research. So, your research, although not directly about childhood trauma, what does it mean for those kinds of cases?
It casts doubt on it.
Right.
But, like I said, I would hate to be a jury member, because, who are you to, and even as an expert, a memory expert, who am I to go and say, your memory is wrong? I mean, unless you have actual evidence, to prove one way or the other. I mean, and like I said, the emotional part could, emotional memories are typically very strong, and maybe they're less susceptible to change. I don't know. I would doubt it, but it's possible.
Well, and does this have anything to do? One of the lines in the research is that this mechanism, our memory rewriting the past, that it helps us survive. What does that mean?
Well, I think dealing with some really difficult experiences, like, you've heard the phrase, time heals all wounds. Well, my kind of opinion about that is, time doesn't heal all wounds. It's that we forget. And either we forget, partly we forget, and partly we change our memories too of things that happen. And so I was using this example of, let's say you have a kind of a bad breakup, during...
I've never experienced that. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Or even just been rejected, friends.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, so this is hypothetical. Go ahead.
Yeah, completely hypothetical. Yeah. So, when you're involved with this person, maybe, you think that they're so wonderful and the relationship is so great and all these things, then, they break up with you, or, whatever. And at first it's really difficult to deal with that. Oh, but they were so great, and, what's wrong with me? And, you kind of deal with it this way. And that can't persist. I mean, if that persisted, you'd be a really depressed person, and nobody else would want to talk to you, because it would be, woe is me all the time. Yeah. If over time, I think what tends to happen is we reflect differently on those relationships and on those people. That's like, oh, that guy actually was such a jerk to me. He's really critical. Oh, he drank too much, or any of these different things. You start to kind of change the narrative or the memory that you had of this person, so that you end up being, oh, I'm so glad I'm not involved with that person anymore. And the thing is that what you're doing is projecting these current feelings onto the memory. And why this is adaptive is because you have to deal with not being with that person and move on with your life, and go experience other things. And
so your memory dulls the edge, basically, like
or actually changes it.
Well, and I think about, there's a 60 Minutes piece on people who have like this amazing recall memory, and I also think about I spent some time with the Kaczynski family. Dave Kaczynski, again, Ted is his brother, is the Unabomber, and Ted had this amazing recall, and in fact, not just recall, but a slight or a hurt done to him, a decade earlier was still fresh. Like, he still felt that and still harbored anger, and felt sort of powerless against that. So I can only imagine how, not being able to let that go could twist us. Yeah,
and not be adaptive at all. Yeah. Be really detrimental to our lives and to the way we can experience things. I mean, and so post-traumatic stress disorder is a really interesting thing to me too, because it's something that needs a lot of more research, and especially now we see with war veterans that come back. It's like a necessary symptom of fighting in a war. It seems to happen to everyone, and it's to different degrees, and it's really a crazy impairment. And to me, I wonder, I think that there's a number of things going on, of course, with the emotional system, but I wonder with the memory part, if they're unable to let go, meaning they're unable to change their memories. And I think you have to get over maybe with some of the things that they experienced in war.
Well, and this has all been very dark, and I want to make it lighter in just a moment. but I have one more follow-up question, and that is, all this seems to be subconscious. Can we consciously change our memory? Do you have any insight into that?
There's been studies about trying to consciously. So, like kind of it's actually really a classic thing. It's if you've ever heard of classical conditioning. So it's classic, which is, associating a tone with getting a shock or feeling some pain. Mm-hmm. And so they've done it with animals, they've done it with people, all of these things. And so you learn this like really basic association. You hear a sound, and even without the shock, you expect to feel pain. And what you can do to get over this is it's called extinction training. And so over many times you hear the sound, but you don't get shocked. And you repeat this many, many, many times so that finally the subject will start to learn, okay, the sound is not associated with the shock. And so what's interesting about extinction, it's not that they're forgetting about the original association between the tone and the shock, but they're learning this new association.
Right. Well, and that sounds about that sounds what Scientology sessions are, where you go over and over and over a memory until it loses its power.
Yeah, and I think that's partly why psychotherapy works. Talking about your problems.
Not if you're a Scientologist, but go ahead.
I don't really know much about like what Scientology entails in terms of the sessions.
It sounds like you described exactly like one of.
Well, that's a really basic old psychology, extinction and classical conditioning. I mean, there's thousands of studies on this stuff.
So Donna, I want to talk a little bit about the science of some of this. So, what is the hippocampus exactly, and how does this play into the whole equation?
Yeah, so the hippocampus is kind of the primary structure that I study. So it's involved in memory, and we've known that for a long time. And it's a little bit disputed about what it does exactly, but one way to think about it, its purported role is the hippocampus can serve as kind of a pointer or an index to memories. So you might not think about the hippocampus as actually storing memories. Basically, the whole part of the cortex, the brain, that is involved in an experience. So let's say you're riding your bike, right? You have a memory of riding your bike. Now that's going to involve, motor cortex, your visual cortex, all of these, you might be having sounds associated with the smells, like all of the different parts of the cortex that are involved in processing those these sensory, stimulations are involved in a memory. And so what the hippocampus does is it ties these elements together. And so when you get, say, a cue, like you smell something, and that takes you right back to an experience, that reliving of the experience involves recruiting all of these different areas that were involved in the actual experience, and the hippocampus points to them, and it links them together. And so the hippocampus is very small, especially relative to the whole cortex, and so it doesn't actually store the memories there.
So is it the editor? Is that what you're saying?
So one, it stores memories, and then the other thing is that it is important for creating the memories too. Okay. And so one idea that we think is what the hippocampus does is it binds two kind of arbitrary units together. So let's say a face and a name. Sure. You learn these two things, a time and a place, anything like that. We think the hippocampus is responsible for just forming a link between two arbitrary things. Mm-hmm. And
is it a link, or is it actually a new package?
No, it's a link, I would say. Yeah. But the hippocampus is also involved in other things like spatial navigation and things like that. So it's this very basic structure in animals and humans, and it's studied a lot, but we don't, and it's implicated in a lot of different functions, and the general function being memory. But how we think about it is that, well, it's binding two things together. It serves as a link. So what's interesting about the hippocampus is that, okay, it's important for creating a new association, creating new memories, and then later accessing them. But what we showed here was that it's also involved in modifying existing memories. So it can not only create a new memory, but it can also add information to existing memories. And so that's where, in our paper, we call it, the same hippocampal process that's involved in memory stability is also involved in memory change. So being able to keep a memory, keep a stable representation of an event, it's also involved in changing that representation. So we didn't really talk about the stability part, but that's another interesting, aspect of memory, and of course, is undisputable, because there are certain parts of memories that are maintained throughout our lives, and that's good, because if everything changed all the time, that would not be adaptive, and how could we really function?
Well, and is this the same across personality types? Because my curiosity here is, if you have somebody who's sort of a sociopath, or, somebody with a very, very strong ego, and to some extent, we are all the superheroes in our own story. I don't think anybody chooses, nobody chooses to be an extra in their own life. But, is there any research about how that either forms different kinds of personalities, or how different personalities use memory?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I don't really know much about that. But I imagine what aspects of an event, or, a person's personality, what aspects get bound and later remembered vary as a function of personality. Huh. So I and this is just speculation, but of course, what one person's going to remember from an event, and somebody with one type of personality, after they give a talk, let's say a presentation at a group of people, you could come out, one person that has very low self-esteem or something like that comes out, and there wasn't much applause, people really didn't like it. Maybe they got one critical question and they thought everybody hated it.
Yeah, that's every artist ever, by the way, just so you know.
Well, versus somebody else who's actually really self-confident and maybe even a little arrogant, I don't know, might come out being like, that went great, and I had one, maybe not even realize that one critical question, just notice how many people were smiling and nodding their heads the whole time when they were talking, and things like that. I don't know. But the point is that what they choose, or maybe not choose, but what ends up getting later remembered, I imagine definitely has to do with personality.
Well, what again? And I want to make this a little bit lighter, and we're talking about
psychopaths.
No, but our memory rewriting the past, and what implication does that have for sort of like cultural establishments or myths, like love at first sight? What does that mean for those sort of things?
Well, again, I think that we're always kind of rewriting the past to fit what's happening right now. I mean, and so who knows if it's true about love at first sight? Actually, my advisor, Joel Voss, who's a co-author on the paper that just came out, also actually came up with that. And then later he was like, no, that can't be the focus because people are thinking that we study relationships or something like that. But, that idea was that, how a lot of people think, it was love at first sight. They were so dreamy. They were so funny. All of these different, characteristics. Maybe even things that they couldn't have even known about a person, till later. And so that's the idea, that now all of these different things about a person. How funny they are, how much they know about some topic, or how good they are at fixing things that you would not even know, back when you met them, but they kind of project the current knowledge onto those memories. And I think that's probably good. That's good. I'm happy. I would be happy if, you can remember things as being, always being great, and that this is it for me. And I knew from the beginning. I mean, I think that probably reinforces the relationship.
So, Donna, I have one more question, and that is, how do you think you're going to remember this conversation?
Definitely a lot differently than what it's going to sound like.